The sea is still, not the calm kind of still, the kind that precedes something terrible. There's a small island in the northern Persian Gulf. You could fly over it and think nothing of it. You could look at it on a satellite image and see only terminals, pipelines, and tankers lined up in the water like they are waiting for something. It has no famous history, no ancient ruins, no name that appears in school textbooks. But here is what you need to know about this island. 90% of Iran's oil exports pass through it. Every military satellite in the world knows exactly where it is. Every war planner in Washington and Tel Aviv has drawn up plans to destroy it. The coordinates have been in American military computers for decades. Israeli pilots have trained for the mission. The target is mapped, measured, and understood down to the precise location of every pipeline and every terminal. And yet, no one has touched it. Not Trump, not Israel, not NATO, nobody. Not because Iran can protect it. Iran's air defenses are real, but not invincible. American and Israeli forces have penetrated far more difficult targets. The island could be destroyed. The capability exists. The plans exist. So why is it still standing? Because destroying it would not just hurt Iran. It would shake the entire global economy within 48 hours. It would trigger a chain reaction that no government on Earth has the tools to stop. Its name is Kharg Island. And it is the most honest summary of everything this war actually is. Remember that name. Because by the time this story is over, you will understand why that small, unremarkable island, sitting quietly in the Persian Gulf, is the key to understanding not just this conflict, but the entire architecture of the modern world. A tanker sits anchored at the edge of the Strait of Hormuz, its crew silent, watching the sky. Somewhere above them, satellites blink in low orbit, watching every ship, every military vessel, every movement of water and steel. Somewhere below the surface, submarines wait. And in the capitals of every major power on Earth, Washington, Moscow, Beijing, Tehran, Brussels, Riyadh, lights burn through the night. This is not just a war between two countries. This is a story about how the whole world is connected by oil pipes and fiber cables, by debt and dependency, by fear and ambition. And here's the part that will genuinely shock you before this story is done. The countries supplying the weapons, the satellites, the minerals that make those weapons function, they are not just allies of the fighters. In many cases, they are simultaneously supplying the other side too. In the 21st century, wars are not fought only with bombs. They are fought with oil prices, rare earth minerals, proxy armies, satellite intelligence, and the quiet power of whoever controls the supply chain. So if Kharg Island is this important, if 90% of Iran's financial lifeline flows through a single island that America could destroy, why hasn't it happened? To answer that question, you first have to understand what Iran actually built and why it built it. Since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Iran has lived under American sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and the constant shadow of potential military strikes. Its economy has been strangled. Its people have watched their currency collapse. It has been surrounded. American military bases in Iraq, in Qatar, in Bahrain, in Saudi Arabia. The Persian Gulf ringed with American power. One Iranian general described it plainly. "They are everywhere around us," he said. "What would America do if Iran had military bases in Canada and Mexico?" Iran's answer to this encirclement was not to build a conventional military that could match America. That would be impossible. Instead, Iran built a web. Strategists call it the axis of resistance, a network of allied militias and proxy forces stretching across the region. Lebanon's Hezbollah, battle-hardened and heavily armed, watching Israel's northern border. Yemen's Houthi forces, capable of striking Red Sea shipping lanes and disrupting 12% of the world's cargo routes. Armed factions in Iraq and Syria, embedded in cities, invisible in crowds, impossible to eliminate with airstrikes. The doctrine is asymmetric deterrence. If you can hit us from the sky, we will be everywhere on the ground. You cannot bomb a network. You cannot occupy an idea. But here's the first thing most people do not know about how that network actually functions. And this is the moment the story changes. Iran does not run this network alone. From the mountains of Lebanon to the deserts of Yemen, Iranian-aligned forces rely on something invisible but absolutely essential, something that cannot be seen from the street, cannot be photographed by journalists, but without which the entire network would lose its coherence within weeks. Russian satellite intelligence, real-time targeting data, encrypted battlefield coordination, the ability to track American carrier group movements in the Persian Gulf and adjust strike vectors accordingly, the ability to coordinate 5 different militias in 5 different countries so that they function not as separate armed groups but as a single responsive organism. Think about what that means in practice. When a Houthi drone launches from Yemen and strikes a container ship in the Red Sea with precision, that precision has a Russian signature. When Iranian forces track the movement of an American carrier group and reposition their defenses accordingly, those are Russian satellites doing the tracking. When Hezbollah in Lebanon and militias in Iraq and Houthi forces in Yemen coordinate a simultaneous multi-front response to an American strike, the nervous system running, that coordination has Russian architecture behind it. Remove Russia from this equation, and Iran does not just become weaker. Iran becomes blind. Its proxy network loses its precision. The drone strikes become scattered. The missile attacks become less coordinated. The organism that today functions as one begins to fragment into 5 separate, disconnected militias operating without a shared picture of the battlefield. An Iranian general, speaking carefully, once described it this way. "We have friends," he said, "who see what we cannot see ourselves. Russia is inside this war. Without firing a single public missile, without deploying a single soldier to the Gulf, Russia is present in every Iranian strike, every coordinated proxy operation, every moment when Iranian forces demonstrate an awareness of American movements that their own technology could not produce alone. And while Russia is feeding intelligence to Iran in the Gulf, America is doing the exact same thing for Ukraine and Eastern Europe. The symmetry is almost too precise to believe. American military satellites track Russian troop movements, supply lines, missile launch positions across a 1,000-kilometer front in Ukraine, and feed that data to Kiev in real time. Ukraine's ability to strike Russian logistics, intercept missile salvos, and coordinate counteroffensives across multiple fronts simultaneously, none of it is possible without American eyes in space. Remove American satellite support, and Ukraine cannot see. The defensive architecture that is held against one of the world's largest armies begins to crack. Russia is the eyes of Iran. America is the eyes of Ukraine. 2 superpowers, providing the identical service to their respective proxies, watching each other do it, and maintaining just enough public distance to avoid calling it what it is. Russia and America are at war with each other. They simply have not told their own soldiers yet. But now the story gets stranger still. Because there is a third player in this web, and its role is the most unsettling of all. China is not at war with anyone. China is doing business with everyone. And that distinction, the carefully maintained position of commercial neutrality, is the most powerful strategic posture on the entire board. Beneath every modern weapon system in this conflict, American Tomahawk missiles, Iranian drones, Russian air defense batteries, the satellites that both superpowers use to guide their proxies, there are rare earth minerals, neodymium for missile guidance systems, cobalt for jet engines, lithium for battlefield communications, tungsten for armor-piercing munitions, dysprosium for the electric motors inside military drones. China controls roughly 60 to 80% of the world's rare earth processing capacity. Not just the mining, the processing, the transformation of raw ore into the purified, refined elements that defense industries actually need. That infrastructure is overwhelmingly, deliberately, strategically Chinese. And it did not happen by accident. China spent 30 years building this position while the rest of the world was focused on other things. The consequence is almost too extraordinary to state plainly. American missiles are built with Chinese rare earth minerals. Iranian drones are assembled with Chinese components. Russian air defense systems incorporate Chinese materials. The satellites America uses to guide Ukraine and the satellites Russia uses to guide Iran. Both depend on supply chains that run through Chinese processing facilities. Chinese materials are, through different supply chains, reaching every side of every conflict on this board. America is building weapons to fight Iranian-backed forces with Chinese materials. Russia is building satellite systems to guide Iranian attacks on Americans with Chinese materials. The drones Iran fires at American ships contain Chinese components. The systems America uses to intercept them were manufactured with Chinese rare earths. One American defense analyst, speaking off the record, said what many in Washington already know but rarely admit publicly. "We have been raising this issue for 15 years, he said. Nobody wanted to hear it when the prices were cheap and the supply was reliable. Now step back and look at the entire board at once. Russia is feeding intelligence to Iran to fight America. America is feeding intelligence to Ukraine to fight Russia. China is supplying materials to America, to Russia, to Iran, to essentially every party in every active conflict. America's war in the Gulf disrupts Iranian oil production, which drives up global energy prices, which means Russia earns more from every barrel it sells to China and India and the global South. So America's war is partially funding Russia's war economy. Washington is simultaneously fighting Moscow through Ukraine and through the mechanism of rising oil prices, financing Moscow through the Gulf. This is not a conspiracy. No one sat in a room and planned this. It is simply what happens when the world becomes so deeply interconnected that the line between ally and adversary, between funding a friend and arming an enemy, dissolves entirely. In this war, everyone is fighting everyone. Everyone is supplying everyone, and everyone is dependent on everyone. The web is not a metaphor. It is the actual architecture of the modern world. And inside that web, there's one single point that reveals everything. One target that makes all of it visible. One island that proves, more clearly than any analysis, more honestly than any diplomatic statement, exactly what this war is and what it is not. Kharg Island. You already know the number. 90% of Iran's oil exports, every barrel sold to China, to India, to the buyers who continue purchasing despite Western sanctions, it passes through Kharg. It is Iran's financial spine, the source of the money that funds Hezbollah, that arms the Houthis, that maintains the militia networks across 5 countries, that keeps the Russian satellite coordination operational, that sustains the entire axis of resistance through decades of pressure. Without Kharg, the revenue stops. Without the revenue, the network starves. Without the network, Iran's strategic deterrence, the asymmetric architecture built over 40 years, collapses within months. So ask the question again, now that you understand the full picture. America has the most powerful military in human history. It has struck Iranian proxies across multiple countries. It has killed Iranian generals on foreign soil. Israel has launched direct strikes on Iranian territory. The two sides are in an active state of military confrontation with casualties on both sides, and no diplomatic resolution in sight. And Kharg Island, the target that would end Iran's ability to fund its entire war machine, has not been touched. Why? Because Kharg Island is not just Iran's vulnerability. Kharg Island is the world's hostage. Destroy Kharg Island and Iranian oil disappears from global markets overnight. Prices spike immediately, not gradually, not over months, but within days. American consumers feel it at the gas pump before the smoke has cleared. European industries feel it in energy costs before the week ends. Asian manufacturing begins recalculating within hours, and China feels it most directly of all, because China is the primary buyer of Iranian oil. Chinese refineries, Chinese strategic reserves, Chinese industrial supply chains, they are built around a flow of energy that moves through Kharg Island terminals every single day. Beijing has never needed to issue a public statement about Kharg. It has never needed to make an explicit threat. The message is written into the structure of the global economy itself, in a language Washington reads fluently and cannot ignore. Strike Kharg, and you strike Chinese economic interests. Strike Chinese economic interests, and the most consequential economic relationship in the world, the relationship between Washington and Beijing, enters territory that neither side has the tools to control or the experience to navigate. China holds trillions in American debt. China sits at the center of global supply chains that American industry depends on. The leverage runs in both directions, and both sides know it. Then there is what Iran has promised in response. Strike Kharg, Iranian officials have communicated through every available back channel, and the Strait of Hormuz closes. Not partially, not temporarily, entirely. To everyone. Saudi oil, Emirati oil, Kuwaiti oil, Iraqi oil, all of it landlocked in a gulf with no exit. 20% of the world's daily oil supply stopped. The global economy does not absorb that shock. It convulses. The strike that would hurt Iran most is the strike that would trigger the response that damages the entire world most. And so Kharg Island sits there, untouched, protected not by Iranian air defenses, not by Russian missiles, not by any military force, but by the simple, brutal, inescapable fact that destroying it would cost everyone else more than they are willing to pay. This is the Kharg Island paradox. Iran's greatest vulnerability is simultaneously the world's most effective shield, not for Iran's sake, but for everyone else's. Iran survives not because it is strong enough to win, but because destroying it would cost the world more than the world has decided to spend. Dependency itself is the most powerful weapon anyone holds in this conflict, and Iran has learned to stand behind the world's dependency better than any missile battery could ever protect it. Now, somewhere in Brussels, European leaders are sitting around a long table, speaking in 5 languages, saying essentially the same thing. We did not want this. 70% of European imported energy passes through or near the Persian Gulf. If those routes are disrupted for 6 months, inflation, power shortages, factory closures, not inconvenience, crisis. Europe spent years after the Ukraine war reducing its dependence on Russian energy. It built LNG terminals, signed new contracts, told its citizens the problem was solved, and now the Gulf itself is burning. But then the president of the European Council stands. He is not talking about gas prices. He is speaking about something that has been building for years and has finally found its words. You are destroying the global order, not pointing at Iran, not pointing at one country, pointing at Washington, at Moscow, at Beijing, at all of them simultaneously. The institutions we built after the Second World War, he says, were not perfect, but they prevented a Third World War for 80 years. And right now, the most powerful nations on Earth are dismantling them. Not by accident, by choice. And when it is gone, what replaces it? No one answers, because no one has an answer. The German Chancellor captures the paralysis with unintentional honesty. We support our American allies, he says. We support diplomacy. We support a ceasefire. We support all things simultaneously because the alternative is to choose. And choosing has consequences we cannot afford. The warning hangs in the air, unanswered, unresolved. In Dubai, from the 130th floor of a skyscraper still under construction, the future looks impossibly bright. New cities, airports expanding, Formula One races, hundreds of billions in foreign investment transforming desert into skylines of glass and ambition. And all of it could evaporate in a week. In one generation, a Gulf minister said, "We went from a fishing village to a financial hub competing with London. Every investor, every tourist, every airline, they come because we are stable. Stability is our product. War destroys our product. Saudi Arabia and the UAE cannot fully support the war without becoming targets, cannot fully oppose it without betraying Washington. They have made a generational bet on the future. Vision 2030, clean energy, economic diversification, young populations promised a world of opportunity. War does not just bomb buildings. It bombs the idea that tomorrow will be better than today. Meanwhile, the real war is already happening, in pieces, in shadows. In Yemen, Houthi drones strike Red Sea shipping lanes, 12% of the world's cargo disrupted. The price of goods rises invisibly. Nobody connects it to the war. Everybody pays for it. In Lebanon, Hezbollah watches a border that could transform a regional conflict into something continental. One miscalculation, one nervous commander at 3 a.m. In Iraq, militias armed with Iranian weapons, coordinated through Russian satellite systems, move through ancient cities in a war with no front lines, no uniforms, no ending. One militia commander said it plainly, "We don't fight for Iran. We fight for ourselves. Iran just happens to be the one giving us weapons. You can bomb every named facility, kill every general whose name you know, and the next morning a drone is still taking off from a dirt field in Yemen. A tunnel is still being dug in Lebanon. A militia is still collecting weapons in Baghdad. You cannot bomb a network. Especially not one with Russian eyes watching from space and Iranian oil money flowing through an untouched island that keeping it funded." And then there is the word no one says out loud in any meeting, any negotiation, any military briefing. Nuclear. Iran has enriched uranium to levels approaching weapons-grade material, built centrifuges deep underground, hardened against airstrikes, played a years-long game of advancement and delay that has left experts divided on where the red line actually sits and whether it has already been crossed in secret. "We can tell you what we see," an IAEA inspector said. "We cannot tell you what we don't see. That is the problem with secrets. They are, by definition, hidden. If Iran announced a nuclear weapons program tomorrow, or conducted a test, the Middle East would be strategically redrawn overnight. Saudi Arabia has already signaled it would pursue its own deterrent. Turkey would not be far behind. The non-proliferation architecture that prevented atomic weapons from spreading for 50 years would crack in a single announcement. And here the web tightens one final time. Russia provided nuclear expertise to Iran for civilian purposes officially. China provided materials through channels inspectors have repeatedly flagged. The program the world is now desperate to stop was built in part with help from the very countries now sitting in rooms calling for restraint. Everyone helped build this problem, one exhausted Western diplomat said. Now everyone is shocked that the problem exists. In the streets of Tehran, a mother tries to buy bread that has doubled in price. In Baghdad, an engineer lost his job when the foreign company evacuated. In Beirut, a school has been closed 4 times this year. "My students ask if there will be a future," an Iranian teacher said. "I tell them yes, but sometimes I'm not sure I believe it myself. Wars are decided by the powerful. They are survived by everyone else. The people of the Middle East did not choose these conflicts, were not consulted, will bear the costs long after the generals have declared victory and gone home. The rare earth minerals China processes, the satellites Russia and America deploy, the oil revenues flowing through Kharg Island, none of it reaches the woman trying to feed her family in Tehran. None of it rebuilds the market in Baghdad. None of it reopens the school in Beirut. The web is extraordinarily sophisticated. The human beings inside it are paying an extraordinarily ordinary price. Every great war reshapes the world. World War I ended empires. World War II created the international order the European Council president is now watching fracture in real time. The Cold War divided the planet. This conflict, whatever its outcome, is accelerating a transformation already underway. The slow fracturing of the world into competing blocs, America and its allies on one side, China and Russia and their partners on the other. And in the middle, the vast majority of the world's countries across Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Middle East itself, refusing to choose. Tired of being other people's battlegrounds, watching great powers preach rules they do not follow and quietly deciding to write their own. "We are told to choose a side," an African Union diplomat said, "between American democracy and Chinese investment. But we have seen both. We have been shaped by both. Perhaps this time we choose ourselves." The web traced in this story: Chinese minerals and American weapons, Russian satellites guiding Iranian attacks, American intelligence arming Ukraine, Gulf oil funding, the conflicts that threatened Gulf stability, Kharg Island standing untouched because the world cannot afford to touch it. That web is not sustainable. It is the architecture of a world too interconnected for full war and too divided for genuine peace. A world balanced on contradictions that grow heavier every year. Something will give. Either the dependencies unwind, painful, expensive, destabilizing, or the contradictions produce a crisis the system cannot absorb. A miscalculation. A leader who decides the rules no longer apply. A moment when someone reaches for Kharg Island, or closes the strait, or crosses the nuclear threshold, and the carefully balanced structure of mutual dependency reveals itself for what it always was. Not peace, a delay. The tanker is moving again, the shipping lanes are open, the missiles have stopped falling, at least for now. Russian satellites are still in orbit, American intelligence networks are still running, Chinese processing facilities are still loading rare earth minerals onto container ships bound for factories on every continent. Kharg Island is still standing, still pumping, still flowing. The Gulf skylines are still rising, the European capitals are still arguing, the web is still intact. For now, in Tehran, a teacher stands in front of her classroom. Her students have come back. They're asking questions again, not about survival, but about the future. A student raises her hand. "What happens now?" she asks. The teacher pauses. She looks out the window at the city that has survived everything: revolution, war, sanctions, isolation, and the relentless pressure of being a pawn in games played by giants. The city sitting in a country with an island no one will touch, because destroying it would cost the world more than anyone is prepared to admit. She turns back. She picks up the chalk. "Now," she says quietly, "we find out what we are made of. In a world this interconnected, the most powerful weapon is not a missile, not a satellite, not a rare earth mineral mined from the earth. It is dependency itself. And the small island that nobody bombs, sitting in the Persian Gulf, pumping 90% of Iran's financial blood into the veins of the global economy, is the proof